My name is Christian Herrera. I am a junior.
I'm BJ Laudermilk, the sports editor with the East Texan, and I am a senior.
I'm Zach Cottam. I'm a staff reporter with the East Texan, and I'm a freshman.
I'm Jasmine Baker. I am a grad student and also a writer for KETR Sports.
Hello and welcome to today's talk. I'm Imogené Wofford. All right, so you guys tell me how you feel about it. You think they should be able to kneel during the national anthem?
Well, I think under the First Amendment, because they did say they were protesting, I believe that they should be able to stand up for their right to kneel, to not take their hat off, because it is covered under the First Amendment. If you were allowed to burn the American flag and that be covered underneath the First Amendment, I do believe that they should be allowed to kneel.
So I get what you're saying, but an argument you can make to that is that some people don't think you should be able to burn the flag anyways, so it's kind of setting yourself up to just for someone to argue the same point against it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it is guaranteed to you that you have the right to protest. That's one of the things that our founding fathers did when they set up this country, was including that in the Bill of Rights and the First Amendment to the Constitution, was that we would have these 5 basic freedoms of speech, of the press, of religion, and one of them, most importantly for this issue, is the right to protest.
I personally think they should be able to protest. You know, at the end of the day, especially when you look at any league that's done it so far, especially the WNBA, I really want to point this out. WNBA really, as a league, was at the forefront of this the entire way. So I just want to point that out. Colin Kaepernick, of course, has been at the forefront of this, and I think when people talk about the protest, making sure we stay on top of it in terms of police brutality and injustice, in terms of the system, making sure that's still at the forefront of making sure people understand what the movement has always been about. Because people will sit up there and try to whitewash what's going on right now, and that's not fair to any of these players, anybody who's protesting. So I definitely agree with the First Amendment rights of these players. I think they need to continue to be strategic about how they go about doing this, for sure.
And something that I think that you were kind of alluding to was sort of the division that it's brought. It has split the fans from the NFL players themselves to a point of, maybe they may not want to support that. It really is a division that I think this week some of the NFL owners are going to discuss and hammer out those details, whether they actually need to be standing or kneel, if it's okay for them to kneel.
One thing that I will say in regard to that, you look at the viewership for the NFL, and it doesn't seem like it's taken a hit. In fact, instead of losing viewers, as we've seen in the past few years for the NFL is actually gaining viewership because people are interested to see and tune in what's going to happen. Are we going to see players kneeling during the anthem or not? And so you still have that division of whether they should or not, but people are still interested to see that, and that means that the NFL continues to earn money because more eyes are watching.
So one problem with this, though, is it doesn't cause a division between fans and the team, but within the players themselves, because the Pittsburgh Steelers offensive tackle Andrew Villanueva actually, the head coach for the Steelers told all of the players to stay inside of the locker room during the anthem, just so that there was absolutely no issue, nobody could comment, so that they could handle it the way that they wanted to without national scrutiny. And Andrew Villanueva went out and stood and put his hand over his heart, and it actually caused a division within the locker room, and it caused a lot of Steelers fans and NFL fans to be upset. So kind of this whole issue of kneeling and not kneeling has brought division between teammates. And so it's causing an issue for the team, and I'm sure it's something that the Steelers and just teams everywhere want to work on, but that's just one of the things I wanted to point out.
So, bringing up teams and owners, do you think that the owners should make it a rule that the players stand during the anthem?
So my thing on this is the NFL is a business, and every owner is essentially an owner of a company. And they can make a rule. A business owner can make a rule that employees might disagree with, and if they break that rule, they might get fired. I think it's okay for owners to make a rule on whether they should stand or not, because it's a business. If this was the government, it'd be different. The First Amendment protects you from the government, not from your employer, which obviously that leads to a whole other issue, but my answer is it's okay.
Yes, legally it is okay. That doesn't mean that it's going to be a popular opinion. And honestly, having something league-wide would be probably better in the long run, so that all these players are essentially, regardless of what team you play for, you are an employee of the National Football League. And so if the National Football League sets a standard for their workplace, employees kind of thing, if they set a rule, it needs to be implemented by all teams. That way you can't say that 31 out of 32 teams are abiding by the rule, but then you have this player on team A that refuses to, and that just makes the whole issue start all over again. So instead of trying to have this on a team by team basis, I think there needs to be, if they are intending to put a rule in place for before the national anthem or before the game starts, it needs to be league-wide.
Okay, so this is also spread to high school sports. What are your thoughts on doing it in high school sports?
So I cover high school football with the Dallas Morning News every Friday night, and from the games that I've gone to, I haven't seen any kneeling. So I went up to one of the head coaches of the school, and I'm not going to say the school just for privacy reasons and whatnot, and I talked to him after the game, and I said, there's been a lot of problems with kneeling, not problems, but there's been a lot of debate about kneeling and stuff for professionals. I noticed no one on your team knelt. Did you take any steps? Like, did you talk to them about it? And he said yes. He said at the high school level, it's not really, it shouldn't be addressed at the high school level, because his big thing was at the high school level especially, you need to teach unity and teamwork. And so his thing was they're either all going to stand or they're all going to kneel. And he decided that they were all going to stand, and no one really objected to it. I don't know if they were afraid to, but
Was he white?
yeah.
Okay. I think part of, and this is just, and this is no offense to college coaches out there, because I have spoken to players at our university, and what I found interesting was that there are some players who seem like, there's some players who just don't get it. And this much I do understand, because I've been in class with some of them, so I understand why they don't get it. But some of them don't understand the importance of protest. Then there are some who don't want to, and I respect that too. At the end of the day, because I don't need, part of it is we don't need everybody out here kneeling and speaking for all of us, because some of them are not going to be articulate enough to get the point across. But also I do think too, when you do have players who do want to do it and they're getting kicked off of teams, you have players who, and this is why I think sports is so important, because it helps, sports, especially football, it's almost like the Army. It's been compared to the Army at times in terms of how it molds young men. It's one of the few last bastions of hope for a lot of young men in this country. And when you kick them off of a football team because they choose to bring to light an issue on something that's directly affecting them every day of their lives, and you're not choosing to address the situation, I think that's one of the bigger issues in terms of why this movement has become so big, because now you have the President of the United States talking about it, and yet again not addressing the situation, but you're addressing the flag, the disrespect to the flag. And we see some hockey player wearing a thong that has the United States flag on it and being doused with beer. So at the end of the day, it's kind of like we're constantly being told your blackness doesn't matter. Your coaches tell you this, media tells you this, and this is part of the problem in terms of why I have an issue with young men getting kicked off a team for doing things that they're standing up for themselves, they're begging for their humanity, and you have coaches telling them not to kneel. It's ridiculous.
In terms of for like high school and that kind of level, I don't think that these players should be kicked off the team for if they want to protest. But what these high schoolers and even college students have to realize is that, if there is something in the school handbook or the school code of conduct, which there normally isn't, if there's something against doing that, then they are subject to punishment or reparations for their actions. But it's one of those fine lines where unless you know that you are protected and you won't have to worry about that, then the higher ups in these school districts and in these schools still have that power to do that, even if they shouldn't.
Do you think that some of these players are doing this for publicity in regards to what the president has said about, players that are kneeling during the anthem, or do you think they're doing this in support of the protest?
Well, our president himself is he's an entertainer, and I think he was the catalyst for this whole conversation, this whole debate. I'm not too sure whether the players themselves are taking that to their advantage. VJ stated that the NFL's viewership is, if not stayed the same, has increased. A lot of eyes are on that, so it could be running through the back of their minds. Definitely, but I do think that the president himself wanted this sort of attention to be brought up because he's an entertainer.
One thing, even, whether it's because of how the protest was initially intended to start, to protest racial injustice and police brutality, if some of the players now are using it as more of a political protest against President Trump than to actually protest how it was originally started. And that might be something that it's still a form of protest for them, but it's not like how it was initially set up by Colin Kaepernick to be intended to use by kneeling before the anthem or during it.
Yeah, I think this was a good stepping stone for players whenever it gave them something more to protest, because I'm sure some of them haven't felt affected by it, and whenever the President of the United States calls you something so vulgar, it kind of ignites a flame inside of you that you feel the need to protest. However, not saying it is publicity, but it's given Kaepernick a lot of bad publicity in the matter that he can't get a job now because no owner wants to deal with it.
Yeah, Kaepernick even said over the weekend that he would stand during the anthem if he could be back in the league as a quarterback. And I just, that spoke to me and said, this man would give up his beliefs, what he stood up for, and what he intended, started to the whole protests up if he could get a job playing again, because he doesn't want that to be the issue. He didn't want it to spiral like this, and he would rather be back doing what he loves, playing football, than to be a source of negative publicity.
I'm gonna stop you because they actually the reporter actually lied about that. He said that Kaepernick said that in an interview, and then come to find out he actually lied about that, and Colin Kaepernick did not say that at all.
Okay.
And when we talk about Colin Kaepernick's job, somebody brought up a good point. I can't remember who it was, but somebody brought up a good point. They were talking about how Colin Kaepernick doesn't have a job. Colin Kaepernick has been working. He's been working, and for as much as they call him an SOB, and people constantly on the internet talking about, well, if he was actually putting his, put himself to work, was actually doing stuff for his community, this man's given almost $1 million out of his own pocket to his community, has been working, has been within the community working, and will continue to do so. He's at the forefront of a movement right now. And so for him not to have a job as a quarterback is not the end of, end all be all for him. And I think he's understood that, and he's been understanding that. I think sometimes when you get caught up in the narrative, I feel like when the president made the remarks he made, again, it's people whitewashing another situation and taking the narrative away from the people who are actually being oppressed and using it for his own political gain. And it's ridiculous, and it's very sickening. And that's what we're seeing. That's why I'm constantly trying to let people know stick with the narrative. Stick with the original narrative. Don't. And I'm pretty sure, like you said, Donald Trump is an entertainer. That's what he does best. That's why he shouldn't be president. So, I think most of us can agree with that. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents.
I think it's a problem that this has become such a problem because Kaepernick is a good quarterback, there's no doubt about it. His decline was due to the 49ers changing up their offense. They changed the offense to not suit him, and it really hurt him. And then with this coming out, it just sent him down a hole that I don't know if he'll be able to climb out of in terms of becoming an NFL quarterback, but I don't think he should be punished this way because of his beliefs.
Especially when you look at the quarterbacks that they've been bringing up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Jake Cutler. I mean, he looks like a washed-up quarterback, which is exactly what he is. But the fact that he's a starting quarterback for the Miami Dolphins is mind-boggling to me. Then you look at all these other quarterbacks who haven't played since college. If they barely played college, you have some washed-up arena football players that are getting these jobs over him, and it sends a bigger message to people when you see something like that. It's like, what else? So many people, so many minorities and people of color see in this country every single day. So this is the NFL. What the NFL is doing to him is only a microcosm of what you see every day in this country.
Okay, guys, the final question. Do you think that Mike Pence walking out of the stadium was genuine, or do you think that was for publicity?
I think the whole issue of Mike Pence being at an NFL game was for publicity. But I know that sometimes, politicians want to be, normal people and enjoy a football game, but it did seem like there was more of a political tie to his visit, even though it's his hometown team. He was back in his state of Indiana, where he used to be the governor there, to watch the Colts game. But it did seem like he was going there as part of to survey what was going to happen if players were going to kneel before the anthem, so that he would have an excuse to say to get up and leave and go to an event that he was already scheduled to go for later in the day. But it gave him another narrative to say that the president and I will not support any players that kneel before or during the anthem.
I think it's way too convenient that in the midst of all this, he decided to walk out. And it's just, the timing of it was totally off. If this was genuine, then it was the most lucky thing that's ever happened. Because in this, today, this is such a prevalent issue, and he's talked about it, the president has talked about it, Roger Goodell has talked about it, everybody that has a mouth has talked about this issue. So the fact that he decided to go to this game and spend his money and then just walk out and leave. No normal person spends money and goes to a football game, sees someone kneeling that they don't know personally, and they don't know the reason behind their own, their personal reasons for kneeling, and decides, man, I'm gonna leave.
Now, mind you, too, he didn't spend his money. He spent our American dollars. He spent our hard-earned dollars to go to this game and walk out. So that's the real tea of all this. And the fact that last time I checked, it was estimated over $200,000 was spent for him to go on this trip. Most American families don't even make that much in a year. Can you imagine? Can you only imagine it? And I'm sitting there thinking, I've seen a video of these two young ladies throwing drinks on young black men who were sitting. I'm sure some of you have seen online. They were sitting, they were not kneeling, but they were actually sitting in their chairs during the national anthem. Two young women walked up to them and threw drinks on them. Don't let your president get you hurt out here. I'm not going to hurt you, but I'm just saying, it's getting to the point now where it's like, I get you're down for who you voted for and that, but don't let anybody get you hurt. This is ridiculous. You know what I'm saying? I wish people would put this much effort. I wish Mike Pence would put this much effort into making sure that players don't have to kneel. I wish he would put that much effort, that much money into these sort of programs and things that within the community, so these people do not have to kneel. We're basically begging for our humanity, and you're walking out of a game that some people want to go to. Mind you, some people can't even get into a game like that because the tickets cost too much, and you're just walking around throwing around people's money all around. It's ridiculous. I cannot stress that enough.
All right, that's all we have today for today's talk. Thank you guys for tuning in and watching today's episode on To Kneel or Not to Kneel. Make sure that you pick up a copy of the October 12th issue. The story will be in there. It is on page 2, the opinion page above the fold, To Kneel or Not to Kneel. Make sure you check us out on Twitter at East Texan Online, and also make sure you check out the East Texans website, TAMECEasttexan.com. Go Lions.